Hello and welcome to Mindscapes, our series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today had a long and distinguished career in the civil service. He's a former Indian ambassador to the United States, a special rapporteur to the United Nations on the freedom of expression and opinion, a member of the UNESCO Cell on Democracy and Development, and a member of the Constitution Review Commission, not to speak of the numerous other educational trusts and institutions that he is a part of and contributes his rich and varied experience. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Abid Hussain.
Thank you very much.
Abid Sahib, you have had so many areas of interest, and we will just be able to pick on a few for our relatively brief conversation today. And I wondered if we could look at this issue of democracy and development. There has frequently been the feeling that perhaps India has paid the price for democracy, both in terms of our ability to initiate change in terms of economic reforms, to be able to look at issues such as population control, without really sort of questioning the innate value of democracy. How do these sort of balance out for you?
First, I would say that democracy is the most valuable political institution that the human mind in history has been able to create. But certainly, it is not an easy process of governance or an easy polity as such. But if you look to the democratic values, which are the basis of democracy, you find that no human society can ever develop unless and until there is a drive towards those democratic values. And when I talk democratic values, there are two or three things which come to my mind. One is the rights of a human being, the right to be free in terms of beliefs, in terms of speech and expression, and in terms of his expectations from the government.
Just look at this issue of rights. Many countries have held that there is no such thing as universal rights. We've looked at the issue of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and certainly China has held that no, there is no Universal Declaration of Rights. These are culture specific. So in what ways do you perceive this issue of rights?
You see, what I would say would be there are certain rights which are universal, and there are certain rights which are specific and particular to certain cultures. But to say, for instance, you see that the human right for freedom of opinion and expression is a Western value and not an Eastern value, I differ with it completely. Because to say that you see that opinions were gagged in the civilizations of China or India or any other part of Asia would really be to be very prejudicial to the understanding of the history of the East. I accept one thing, that the way in which you see the West has been able to develop some of the human rights is remarkable, no doubt about it. And that is connected with the industrialization which came there, that came up with the class conflicts which were able to arise over there, which were not there in the agrarian societies. But to say that if we were to transfer or transmigrate ourselves from a feudal and an agrarian society to a capitalistic or a neo-socialistic society is not in keeping with our tradition, it will be totally wrong.
We have frequently seen sort of democratic societies or societies that are struggling with their democratic processes. We've seen this in Pakistan, we've seen this in Indonesia, we've seen it in several countries, that the ensuing chaos sometimes, which is the churning of democracy, creates a sense of frustration, exasperation, which almost seems to sort of legitimize, and the communities seem to welcome authoritarian regimes with the hope that these will bring some sort of order. It rarely turns out that way, but many societies and countries have reached the brink, as it were, and then...
I don't agree with that particular thing for two reasons. One, when you find these particular societies unaccommodative to new ideas, it is really the pronouncements of the fact that they are refusing to change. And the social mobility is the part and parcel of human development as such. So any society, in the name of religion, in the name of culture, if they want to hold them back to the 13th century or to the ancient societies as such, are really conveying an idea that they don't want their societies, the people in the societies or the individuals in that society to move forward. I differ with that. And for the other thing, that it's only the autocratic or the non-democratic governments which make economic development take place is also not the whole truth. Because I can enumerate a number of countries where you have had dictatorship and yet you have not been able to have what you call the development as such. And it is also true that some of the democracies have not been able to achieve as much as one would have expected from the developmental processes to happen. So therefore, to combine the two and say that you see that the democracies delay economic progress and the autocratic regimes, what we call, push them forward is not correct. Now, for instance, you take the Soviet Union, which collapsed. It collapsed not because it did not have the access to economic theories or this thing or the other, but because a Stalinist type of a regime made it impossible for the institutions to grow, to move forward. You see, democracy is really based on certain basic democratic beliefs and values, as I was telling you. And one of the values of democracy is that you must allow what you call differences of opinion and choices to prevail. Where the choices prevail, where a person has got the right to pick his particular idea or ideology or belief or religion, I would say is a society worth living in.
It is frequently perceived that China has been able to make the kinds of economic progress that it has, overtaken India, superior to India, because of its command and control mechanisms of economic management. And somehow our democratic processes have not enabled us sufficiently to rein in corruption, to be able to manage a sort of a controlled decontrol of the economy, which liberalization involves. How do you see China in that sense?
You see, without minimizing the progress which China has made, I would say that China has paid a very heavy cost in terms of human life in order to achieve what they have done. And if you say that this has been good and this has been responsible for the Chinese economic growth, I don't agree. China has made economic growth for reasons other than being autocratic, in the sense that they brought discipline. And I would say that discipline is possible in democracy. They brought the technology and the technological inputs. I would say there are a number of other democratic societies which have done it. And even India, you see, if people were really to see the combined effect of democracy and growth, you will find India is moving in the right direction. It may take time because it's not a one-shot operation. Democracy is a process. And in 50 years, you just see as to how many times the wheel has turned, how many new classes have come into prominence. You just see the parliament. The type of people who are coming and gone are different. And today, if there is corruption, if there is what you call the tie-up between the criminals, the bureaucrats, the politicians and others, it is being openly debated. And I won't be surprised that when we review our constitution and we bring up the things, you will see that in India you would have established a more transparent society, a more free administration, and a greater access to information as such. Now, these are the pillars on which democracy is based, and I don't think China can escape it for long.
Do you see the sort of the seeming processes of chaos and confusion in the Indian political system? We had Swami Ranganathanan on this program some months ago, and he said, well, I just see this, you have the rajas and you have the tamas, and I see this as this process of churning and a process of India discovering its vitality, and change involves this process of churning, and it's not something that we should fear or condemn in any way, and to have this sort of larger view of history. When you look at India around, Do you feel good, positive, and optimistic about
Very
who we
much.
are and where we are?
Very much. Though I'm one of those who believe in it, that there can be less of chaotic changes and there is a more of what you call disciplined way of achieving it. But you just look at the thing which is happening in this country today. 5,000 years ago, the Dalits and others had absolutely no say in anything. 50 years back, we gave a constitution where we said that everybody is equal and we have got to have social mobility and others, but that was not a fact. But the very churning of the process of democracy have brought these particular elements up. And as the saying goes, when you upturn a rock, the insects come out. When a big tree falls, the earth around it is shaken. So surely the insects have come out. Surely the earth is shaken all around. But this is a change, which is a mighty change which is coming into my country.
You're a member of the Constitution Review Commission, and when this was set up, there was considerable controversy and criticism as to the motives and why this was being introduced at this time. What are your own feelings?
You see, my own feeling is this, that there was a political situation which still exists, where there are people who have got doubts and hesitations to believe the beliefs of certain people. And they are not prepared to take the pronouncements on the face value. And therefore, you see, there were raised what you call the questions, that is it another way of covering up certain hideous things which are got to be done. And it was openly said that there is a hidden agenda of the BJP which is going to be unfolded in this. But I think, well, I'm a part of that particular organization, therefore I cannot really say it, but I'm very sure that if you look into the names of the people who are there, they definitely represent different classes, different interests, different ideologies and beliefs. If you look to what you call the chairman of that particular commission, you'll definitely have a feeling that here is a just and a fair man. And apart from that, people thought that through this constitutional reforms, we are going to undo the parliamentary system. We are going to undo the secular character of this country. We are going to push down the rising classes of the Dalits and others. They were based on certain fears. And I won't attribute any malice to them, but surely they had a feeling that these are the things which are wrong and should not be allowed to be done. And I would say that their pronouncements and their opposition to the whole thing in the beginning has been able to have a sobering effect, even on those people who might have had a suspicious, what you call, intention about the whole thing.
What are your own sort of concerns, and what will you be putting forth in this?
See, I'm looking at it this way. 50 years back, Gandhi, Nehru, and Patel and others had a vision of India, a vision of the world, and they thought as to what the Constitution of India should give to its citizens. Today, I definitely feel we have got to look 50 years ahead. A new process of globalization is taking place. New waves of technology are moving. The new ideas are coming in, and you have got to absorb those particular things in the Constitution. Two, in India itself, the 50 years of the churning of the Constitution which was given to us has created a new objective situation. And in this new objective situation, we must look into and review what has succeeded and what has not succeeded. What has succeeded has got to be further strengthened. What has failed has got to be reformed so that you see you could move forward.
What are some of the elements that you feel have succeeded and have failed?
You see, for instance, the democratic process has succeeded. It has to be given further push. And when I say that, it really means that you have got to transfer more and more of power to the institutions below. The power, when it gets centralized, as it did centralize itself in certain parts of these 50-year period, that has got to be disentangled. The second thing which has happened is that in the name of planning, in the name of socialism and others, you see, a hardcore of bureaucratic centralization has taken place, which has not done good not only to India, but in several other countries where it tried. We have got to dismember that particular thing. We had not given a chance for what you call the market forces to come up. I would say that the market forces should be allowed. because what Nehru said at that time was a mixed economy. Not that he said that the market is bad, not that he said that everything is valuable, is under the state control, but what he said that a matching of the two has got to be done. Now we have got to see that with this new progress which has come about, the new forces which are in operation, how far can we make the market socially acceptable and committed to social, what you call, justice. We have got to see as to how far the state should move into areas where it has failed to achieve certain social tasks, and have got to be done. So from both sides you will see that socialization and the social mobility and the social concerns have got to come up, and the Constitution must reflect that. The governments, the legislation and others which are formed in the Constitution must be able to absorb this new truth and see as to how we go about it. Or you take what you call the economic world. Today's economic world is not as close as it was when Nehru and others made this particular, what you call, Constitution. Those were the noble minds, the brightest of the minds, the best of the minds, which had gone to make the Constitution of India. So therefore we have got to respect that nobility of intentions, that strength which they have imparted to each word which is there in it. But we have also got to see how much of it has become meaningful, how much of it has been absorbed by the society. And if it hasn't been absorbed, what are the things which were missing? Where did we go wrong? Did we give too much of security to the bureaucracy that it became indifferent and unaccountable? Did we see to it that where education was concerned, we failed to make it a right, whereby you see we should have made India a literate society, instead of saying that 1/3 of India is illiterate today. And apart from that, you would see that after all in these last 50 years, how many times we have amended the Constitution, how many new legislations have come. So therefore one should not shy away from the fact that one has got to review one's own, what you call, performances, achievements and documents. All over the world it's happening that you see you are giving a new look to the things which were perfectly appropriate at one point of time and deserve to be looked into and redefined in the other. You have got to constantly reinvent and rediscover yourself.
Isn't there a risk that a country like India has some of the best legislations on issues such as women's rights, environment and what have you, that we tend to take an excessively legislative approach? We create laws and we create superstructures and console ourselves that is sufficient for change. Isn't there a risk that we will just sort of play with the Constitution, redefine it and get stuck?
That is where I would like to make a point. However good the legislation may be, however good a Constitution may be, unless and until there is a unity of belief on certain fundamentals, you don't really move forward.
How do you cultivate that unity?
That is the statesmanship of the politician. The politician has got to become a statesman and has got to sell what you call the ideas, which become the ideas of the day.
Do you see that as the fundamental lack in India, the lack of statesmen of that?
Now, for instance, you take the Nehru's generation, of which I was a part as a recipient of those particular ideas and others. What did Gandhi and Nehru did? The biggest thing which they did was to give conviction to India, to give commitments to certain what you call issues and values. And we got identified with that. For instance, at one point of time when I said that let the poor people rise up, I believed in it. I may have failed in that particular thing. Without this belief and faith, whatever you might write will not be of much effect. Now, for instance, even on education, when I say that there should be schools, I also mean there should be good education. All the Nazis in Germany were very well educated people, but they were being wronged in the sense that the wrong and basically bad education was being given. So here we have got to see that when we talk of education, giving the rights to the people, are those really match with what you call our beliefs or not? And that is where I go. Beliefs are extremely important. I'm not saying that you become doctrinaire, but certainly you must have what you call faith and commitment in it. It is that which moves and provides fuel and drive to the whole constitution.
So what, you know, this has been much debated and discussed and written about and analyzed, but what is for you the defining quality of leadership of this nature? Integrity?
Absolutely. Integrity, and again that particular word which I am using all the time, belief that India is a country which always had pluralistic, what you call society. It believed in different religions, different cultures, different languages and others. It was a bouquet of beautiful flowers of different colors and different hues and scents. It was like a music party where you see number of instruments are being played, each instrument with its own individual, what you call, tune. And yet when they combine together, they produce the best of music. And you need a conductor. And that is what is needed. And I'm sure India is going to produce it, because this jarring voice of the different instruments which you are hearing today is always there before an orchestra begins. But then it combines together to produce a beautiful melody. India is going to have that.
But don't you despair that this very pluralism is the issue that's being most, in some ways, questioned and discussed, and that it's threatened is something that's really feared?
No. On the contrary, world is becoming more conscious of multiculturalism today than any time before.
But what about India?
India was the one which started with that. India is going through a new crisis of what you call the different cultures coming closer. You see, one thing is the cultures to be tolerant of each other by remaining different from each other. The other is when the Ganges and the Jamuna meet together in a Sangam and move forward. Ganga was also there, Jamuna is also there, but unless they combine together and Sangam takes place, nothing happens. India is a country where Sangam had taken place long ago. But yes, again, the streams are going in a different direction. Don't bother about it. They are bound to come closer, because there is a basic unity in India which cannot be forgotten or neglected. India is not a nation state in the sense of Bismarck or Europe. India has been a civilization which is a combination of cultures. In our periodical fights and communal, what you call, upsurge and others, you might see it loosening somewhere. But basically, India's real ethos lies in this particular unity in diversity, or rather diversities with unity.
You've had a wonderful ringside view of these processes that you've talked about, and you've mentioned that you were a recipient of Nehru and Gandhi's charisma and the kind of impact they had in the community. As sort of almost a philosopher, bureaucrat, stroke, numerous other hats that you've worn, what kind of profile, where do you see India, say, 50 years from now?
India is going to be one of the leading countries in next 50 years. I'm not talking only from the economic point of view, which can be done, and it has become much easier than ever before, because technology is the biggest input which brings about production and productivity today. It is not oil, it is not gold, it is not money in the capital sense as the bankers think, but it is the mind, it is the knowledge, it is the information, and India has got it in its genes. So therefore, there I will not take up a big, what you call, argument with anybody to prove that India is going to have its leap forward in the coming 50 years. But what India is really going to give is, again, morality and ethics. You read my philosophical discourses of the sages and the saints, the philosophers and the poets. You find something genuinely universal which is implied in it. Those were the people who were able to conceive of the universe beyond the concept of, you see, the best of the philosophers of all times put together. We are able to reach and arrive closer to that thing. And secondly, India, in whatever sense you may take it, has been able to prove that while materialism is good, but don't overvalue it. spiritualism should not be undervalued, but should not be taken as an antithesis to materialism. You see, these combinations of the contrary and the contradictory things which have been part of the ethos and the history of India are again going to emerge and flower and blossom.
Isn't it sort of almost ironic that you say this at a time when we despair so much at the corruption in public life, at the decaying of our institutions, at the loss of our spirituality with the invasion of Western culture? You're a member of the Prasar Bharati board. We see what is happening to the media. What is the basis of this hope? Is this just sort of an intuitive dream that the momentum of the past will carry us forward? What are the elements in contemporary India that point to this?
You see, you have put it very well. It is indeed very ironic when you see these two sides of the coin being reflected at the same point of time. I agree with that thing. But the real thing which has happened is that what we consider to be the culture, what we consider to be the wisdom, what we consider to be the most outstanding features of India were associated with a class which was at the top, the Brahminical class. We neglected totally as to what was happening to the rest of the society or to the rest of the people in this particular subcontinent. Now what is happening is they are also coming up. And when the classes rise up, there is always bound to be the clash between the inherited interests of them. And therefore, at that particular point of time, you definitely notice chaos as such. But then if your fundamentals are correct, if the rock bottom is truth, spirituality, morality, ethics, you cannot go wrong for long. But I would not deny the fact that today India is definitely passing through a very difficult phase. But I won't say India is a failed state. I would not say that India is what you call totally devoid of any cultural sensibilities or sensitivities. I know there are many things of which you say I'm, and you also I'm very sure, will be very critical of. We should be critical of our bad things. And if a person has got to be good, he cannot be good all the time. You remember that when St. Augustus prayed to God, kneeled before the cross and said, "O Lord, make me noble, make me good, make me virtuous." But then he stopped for a second and said, "But not tonight." So therefore you see those sorts of nights do come in a person's life. But these are not the return to the dark ages, certainly not.
Dr. Abid Hussain, thank you very much. This has been a great privilege.